The Pluto phases. The point is Pluto minus 135 degrees. It gives you the leading trine, 120 degrees, of Pluto minus 15 degrees, lagging orb. This point tells you what is the most powerful influence on the people of that sign are the luckiest during that time. Whenever it leaves a sign, the luckiest time of that sign on the element it belongs to ends. We have recently entered the Virgo phase in 2016. Previous Virgo phases have been associated with artificially created famines and tremendous abuses of power. Year 1770. Great Bengal Famine. The famine is estimated to have caused the deaths of 10 million people. Nobel Prize-winning Indian economist Amartya Sen describes it as a man-made famine, noting that no previous famine had occurred in India that century. The East India Company destroyed large areas of food crops to make way for the growing of indigo plants for dye and opium poppies for the production of psychoactive drugs. It increased the tax on agricultural produce from 10% to 50%, transferring much of Bengal's wealth to the company's shareholders. Year 1771. Russian Plague. The plague of 1771 was the last massive outbreak of plague in central Russia, claiming between 52 and 100,000 lives in Moscow alone. The epidemic reshaped the map of Moscow, as new cemeteries were established beyond the 18th century city limits. The plague peaked in September 1771, killing an estimated 1,000 Muscovites a day, 20,401 confirmed dead in September, despite the fact that an estimated 3/4 of population fled the city. Many deaths escaped the statistics, residents, fearing that the infested properties would be destroyed by authorities, routinely concealed the casualties, burying the dead at night or simply throwing them on the streets. Authorities set up chain gangs of prisoners to collect and bury the bodies, but their forces were insufficient even for this single task. Year 1535. Thomas More execution. In 1533, More refused to attend the coronation of Anne Boleyn as the Queen of England. Technically, this was not an act of treason, as More had written to Henry acknowledging Anne's queenship and expressing his desire for the king's happiness and the new queen's health. 34. Despite this, his refusal to attend was widely interpreted as a snub against Anne, and Henry took action against him. After the jury's verdict was delivered and before his sentencing, More spoke freely of his belief that no temporal man may be the head of the spirituality. He was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, the usual punishment for traitors who were not the nobility, but the king commuted this to execution by decapitation. The execution took place on the 6th of July 1535. 1536 Portuguese Inquisition. The Portuguese Inquisition, Portuguese, Inquisição Portuguesa, was formally established in Portugal in 1536 at the request of its king, John III. Manuel I had asked for the installation of the Inquisition in 1515 to fulfill the commitment of marriage with Maria of Aragon, but it was only after his death that Pope Paul III acquiesced. The major target of the Portuguese Inquisition were those who had converted from Judaism to Catholicism, the conversos, also known as New Christians or Moranos, who were suspected of secretly practicing Judaism. Many of these were originally Spanish Jews, who had left Spain for Portugal. The number of victims is estimated around 40,000. 1540 Thomas Cromwell execution. Cromwell was arrested at a council meeting on the 10th of June 1540 and imprisoned in the Tower. His enemies took every opportunity to humiliate him. They even tore off his Order of the Garter, remarking that a traitor must not wear it. His initial reaction was defiance. "This then is my reward for faithful service," he cried out, and angrily defied his fellow councillors to call him a traitor. A bill of attainder containing a long list of indictments, including supporting Anabaptists, protecting Protestants accused of heresy and thus failing to enforce the Act of 6 Articles, and plotting to marry Lady Mary Tudor, was introduced into the House of Lords a week later and passed on the 29th of June 1540. Cromwell was condemned to death without trial and beheaded on Tower Hill on the 28th of July 1540, the day of the king's marriage to Catherine Howard. After the killing, his head was set on a spike on London Bridge. Edward Hall, a contemporary chronicler, records that Cromwell made a speech on the scaffold, professing to die in the traditional faith, and then so patiently suffered the stroke of the axe by a ragged and beggarly miser, which very ungoodly perform at the office. 1540 Europe heatwave. The heatwave was ferocious. The number of days with temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, was at least 3 times as great as usual. Wells and springs dried up that had never done so before. A Swiss chronicler reported that not a drop of water could be found even a meter and a half below the beds of many stream beds. Even some major rivers became small enough to be crossed on foot. We have recently entered the Virgo phase in 2016. Previous Virgo phases have been associated with artificially created famines and tremendous abuses of power. We are entering a 100-year recession.